He calls them on page 31, eternal law, that laws are going to change. We have amendments to our Constitution, but that certain things that are universal accepted behaviors, those are our more eternal laws. He says, if you are true, but not in the same truth with me, cleave to your companions, I will seek my own. I do this not selfishly, but humbly and truly. It is alike your interest, mine and all men's, however long we've dwelt in lies, to live in truth. If we follow the truth, it will bring us out safe at last. So, more good advice in connecting to what we have. That whether you're quarantined or sheltering in place with family, we're figuring out what society thinks, what society believes needs to change or stay the same. We're looking at ethics, we're looking at truth. He says, we're afraid of truth, afraid of fortune, afraid of death, and afraid of each other. So we get it. Fear is part of our society. But he also says that if our laws are bad, or that something needs to be changed, like slavery or the Mexican-American War, or letting same-sex people marry, that if laws need to be changed, we have to do it. And he says, he has a great part on page 32, bottom of page 32, all those green highlights. He says, the moment man acts from himself, tossing the laws, the books, idolatries, and customs out of the window, we pity him no more, but thank and revere him, and that teacher shall restore the life of man to splendor and make his name dear to all history. It's easy to see that a greater self-reliance must work a revolution in all the offices and relations of men, in their religion, in their education, their pursuits, their modes of living, in their property, and in their speculative views. Basically, hey man, if you don't like where you are, you have to be responsible for yourself. And if you don't like what's happening, then you need to change it. He also talks about regrets and reason. And remember, we're in the 1800s. So 1600s, age of reason, bordering. So late 1600s, so early 1600s, age of faith. Then we're getting into late 1600s, 1700s, age of reason. Now we're in the 1800s, which is supposed to be this Renaissance rebirth kind of understanding. Yes, reason is still important, but we need to acknowledge emotions and character. And if we're going to figure out how to make a better government, we need people to be responsible for themselves and their own actions. And he says on page 35 that if you want to travel, if you want to have adventures, for sure do that. But also know that wherever you go, he says, my giant goes with me. That whatever baggage you have and whatever things you're carrying around with you, those are going to go with you wherever. He says on bottom of 35, insist on yourself, never imitate. Your own gift you can present every moment with the cumulative force of a whole life's cultivation. So he, like Candide at the end, talks about cultivation, growing things, planting things, feeding them. At the end of Candide, we saw cultivate your garden, that's part of your job, literally and metaphorically, that it takes work, it takes toil. And that's part of our responsibility for, if our soul's going to grow, we have to do the work. On 37, he says, men have looked away from themselves and at things so long that they've come to esteem the religious, learned, and civil institutions as guards of property, and they deprecate assaults on these because they feel them to be assaults on property. They measure their esteem of each other by what each has and not by what each is. When you get to MLK Jr., that one of the things we saw was, if you've heard MLK's I Have a Dream speech, that he wants people to be measured not by what they have or what they do, but by the content of their character. So Emerson's writing this in 1840, and then 1950s and 60s, MLK kind of brought it back as an idea. He concludes on page 38 with a reference to fortune. We've been looking at fate versus free will all semester. Look at his last paragraph on 38. Looks like this. So lots of highlights. He says, so use all that is called fortune, capital F, which is also like fate. Most men gamble with her and gain all and lose all as her wheel rolls. But do thou leave as unlawful these winnings and deal with cause and effect, another aspect of our argument and rhetoric, also capitalized, the chancellors of God. In the will work and acquire, and thou hast changed the wheel of chance, and shall sit hereafter out of fear from her rotations. A political victory, a rise of rents, the recovery of your sick, or the returns of your absent friend, or some other favorable event, raises your spirits, and you think good days are preparing for you. Do not believe it. Nothing can bring you peace but yourself. Nothing can bring you peace but the triumph of principles. And here I drew a little wheel of fortune that sometimes you get death and destruction, sometimes money, sometimes love. Life brings you different things, but it's up to you to figure out what you want and kind of go get it, which is what Emerson says. And he brings up counter arguments like, you could do this, you could believe wholeheartedly in a political system and put your faith in a king, or do these other things. However, that's going to mess you up because kings are humans and people make mistakes. So when you look at experience, look for some of these same things that we talked about. You're going to look for argument. You're going to look for what you think his purpose is. What kind of persona is he trying to develop? Use of rhetoric. I showed you some alliteration. We saw some really specific evidence with his list of people and examples. So I hope this helps a little bit. If not, just keep going through the text, and you're also welcome to call me or email me or Instagram me, and we will figure it out. Okay, thanks so much for looking at Emerson, and we'll continue next week with Thoreau. Thanks, bye.